Volume 2. That's not the explosion video. There's two versions that I watched. Today we're reading On the Road to Nationalism. A letter from the Caucasus. Among the decisions which will perpetuate the glory of the Liquidators' Conference, the decision on cultural national autonomy occupies by no means the last place. Here it is. Having heard the communication of the Caucasian delegation to the effect that at the last conference of the Caucasian organizations of the RSDLP, as well as in the literary organs of these organizations, the Caucasian comrades expressed the opinion that it is necessary to demand national cultural autonomy. This conference, while expressing no opinion on the merits of this demand, declares that such an interpretation of the clause of the party program, which recognizes the right of every nationality to self-determination, does not contradict the precise meaning of the program. And it expresses the wish that the national question be put on the agenda of the next Congress of the RSDLP. This resolution is important, not only because it expresses the liquidators' opportunist shuffling in face of the rising nationalist tide. It is also important because every phrase in it is a gem. For example, what a pearl is the statement that the conference, quote, while expressing no opinion on the merits of this demand, nevertheless declares and decides. Things are decided in this way only in a comic opera. Or the phrase stating that such an interpretation of the clause of the party program, which recognizes the right of every nationality to self-determination, does not contradict the precise meaning of the program. Just think. The clause in the program referred to, Clause 9, speaks of freedom of nationalities, of the right of nationalities to develop freely, of the party's duty to combat all violence against them. Speaking generally, the right of nationalities within the meaning of that clause must not be restricted. It may be extended to autonomy and federation, as well as succession. But does this mean that it is a matter of indifference to the party? That it is all the same to it? How a given nationality decides its destiny, whether in favor of centralism or succession? Does it mean that, on the basis of the abstract right of nationalities alone, it is possible, quote, while expressing no opinion on the merits of this demand, unquote, to recommend, even indirectly, autonomy for some, federation for others, and succession for still others? A nationality decides its destiny. But does that mean that the party must not influence the will of a nationality towards a decision most in accordance with the interests of the proletariat? Right there. Right there, I think, is the key part that we need to also ask ourselves here as well, right? Especially, I understand, and I've talked about this before, the tendency of some of our comrades on the left in their efforts to be as decolonial as possible, if I may say, sometimes end up being anti-Marxist, and as a result, they end up trampling on all the work that indigenous Marxists have done. because they see indigenous culture as this monolithic thing of the past that is like inherently good and hasn't had its own like struggles forward, or especially current struggles now against the modern demographics that have been created by fucking settler force, etc. Supply dialectics, everything in culture and society is connected. Nationalities are not stagnant forces either. Exactly, Samuel. I think that there is a tendency among some comrades who do really mean well, but like their implications are that they want to go backwards and like return to a past, which is weird when they understand that like First Nations conceptions of nation understand that that other nations can exist alongside in the same area, in the same like physical space essentially, and decide important matters together. Like that doesn't mean that that's not a part of the struggle for like returning control of land to the proper people who should be in control of that land. But communists believe that the proper way to do that is A, to get rid of capitalist private property, that we need socialism due to the modern demographics that society has developed along. One of the really difficult things is being called a racist for being too class focused. I mean, that really depends on the context. I do think that there is a tendency among some groups to maybe to be class reductionist, but I do think that that problem, in a sense, does get some sometimes overstated in the sense that like most of the good comrades I know in Marxist Leninist organizations are not too class focused. It's that mentioning class and connecting class at all for some people is an intolerable thing to hear. But like an example of what I'm talking about with nationalities is that like we understand, for example, that the national liberation struggle is not just for First Nations, but it's also for like black people who were brought here forcibly and are essentially an internal colony here, right? Like, and that's just one example. But I'm just giving you an example of like why we can't just like go back to everything being the way it was before colonization. We have to fight against colonization as it exists right now. One way that Marxist Leninists believe that we should do that is by eventually being able to come together across all of the across all of America. And that's why we believe that the vanguard of our revolution in America is Cuba, and that's like the spearhead. Anyway, I'll read this part again that got me ranting, and then we'll continue. A nationality decides its destiny. But does that mean that the party must not influence the will of a nationality towards a decision most in accordance with the interests of the proletariat? The party stands for freedom of conscience, for the right of the people to practice any religion they please. Does this mean that the party will stand for Catholicism in Poland, for the Orthodox Church in Georgia, and for the Georgian Church in Armenia? That is, that it will not combat these forms of world outlook? And is it not self evident that Clause 9 of the party program and cultural national autonomy are on two entirely different planes that are as capable of contradicting each other as, say, Chep's Pyramid and the Notorious Liquidators Conference? That argument, Chatter says, that argument is very clear in some states, such as Mexico. There is no way we can go back to Mesoamerican civilization, not after 300 years of colony and 200 of liberal republic. Exactly, Samuel. And this is I feel this is some of like the problem that is prominent, not and it's not just among settlers, right? There is it is unfortunately a problem amongst many of like indigenous comrades too, who feel like there's a possibility of like going back. And like I'm not going to get into like details about it, but a while ago we tried to form a coalition, a bunch of a bunch of a bunch of indigenous Marxists, and essentially there was a split between two groups. The one group of us that believed that we, that the Marxist Leninist program essentially is the correct way, and that we have to adapt that to our given conditions. And then another group that was believed that, settlers, or that like no white person ever could ever contribute to the revolution in any scenario whatsoever, that no settler people could ever be a part of Vanguard organization, that you would have to legally exclude them from it, etc., etc. Right? Like, like, and like I get it, I do get it, but it unfortunately is not actually a realistic way that we can build a revolution. And this was the big like fight that we had in this group. And it's like the group was never even able to form rules for the group because of that in the end. Because we couldn't get past that principal misunderstanding, right? And it's like the reason why that is so dangerous is because you do have unrecognized peoples. You have people that like don't necessarily qualify for any one fucking First Nation, but are actually just a mix of a bunch of them and have like no fucking European in them essentially at all. But like these are all contradictions that we can't deal with by just like imagining we can go back to the way things were. This is why this part of what he's talking about here is so important, right? It's like, yeah, I whiteness absolutely has to be combated, but in the same way that we can gain class traders and things, the same way that it is the same way that we can also have people who are traders of whiteness, and we welcome those settlers, any of those settlers into that fight, right? So it's just something it's something that happens. I find especially in like the more anarchist communities, and it's a struggle that we got to ideologically fight against, Would the group require 23 and me? I mean, no. I mean that is still that is like a gaslighting kind of but it is just it is it, again, it is a reactionary thing that us First Nations, like all of my First Nations Marxist Leninists that I organize with and know, all I disagree with that particular strategy, or the idea that no Marx, no no communist here in the West who is white could be a traitor to whiteness, right? Yeah, Samuel, exactly. Exactly. That's the problem. It does, and even though some of these comrades will deny it, like what is the implication otherwise? As long as people are willing to follow that progressive rule of liberated oppressed people, then yeah, even the settlers can stay, right? But they stay under the rules of the formerly oppressed, under the working class ideology, which champions again succession, champions the right of secession, the right to autonomy, etc., etc. But that doesn't mean that we can just like take on these rigid forms of organizations. As Marxist Leninists, what I will determine if somebody will organize in a part will organize with me or not is what ideology they have. Does that make sense? Jorvex, I would appreciate your permission to listen to your stream while streaming myself. Uh, I mean, I guess I'm live. All right. It's just the Twitch rules. Okay, well, please don't break any Twitch rules. Then, restreaming, if restreaming is not allowed on Twitch, please do not do that then. Silver Spook, welcome in. Good to see you, comrade. Yeah, no, I mean, I understand why Shufel asked that, Laney. Just to be fair, Shufel asked that because of I was mentioning a split between a party that I had, and like Samuel said, it is the implication of what they were saying is at the end of the day like pro fucking blood quantum, sadly, in a sense. I mean, I'm trying to because I'm trying to get across the fact that like they are still good people. They still mean well. This is a problem that people have here of on the left here, right? Is like it's like if you bring any kind of like ideological or tactical disagreement. I feel like I talk about this all the time, but it's like if you bring any kind of tactical disagreement or like political misalignment to people and mention it, it's like people will be like, "Oh shit, so you hate them, right?" And I'm not saying anyone here is necessarily doing that, but I'm just saying that's like the typical. I can even show you that happening today actually. In fact, when I was online here. I just said leftists really got to stop acting like any fucking ideological conversation that makes them uncomfortable is yelling at them. I get you were all raised to be assholes, but if we can't have tough ideological conversations, we aren't building any kind of solid movement. And then this person, rename yourself LARPing Larry. If you punch left, you were part of the problem. Like again, I'm just talking about I'm literally just talking about having an ideological conversation. How is that right? How is that punching left? It's like yesterday when I was talking about anarchism, right? Was that me punching left? Or was that simply me explaining my position and the Marxist Leninist position on anarchism to give comrades some idea who might not know what that difference is? I even feel like I saw people in that chat while we were having that conversation who said like, I'm actually rethinking calling myself anarchist because I never thought of these things before, right? It's like that's what I feel like it's not like and if anarchists feel like they have a really solid critique of Marxism Leninism, by all means, let's hear it, right? We address them all the time on this channel. you know? So it's weird to me whenever I see like that kind of attitude. And so the reason why I'm saying this is like even though there is this disagreement between these comrades and it ended up splitting the group and we couldn't organize together in a party capacity, that doesn't mean like I hate any of them or anything like that, right? I just want to be very clear about that. It just means that we had a pretty fundamental disagreement. where I like the Marxist Leninist side thought that we need to like go forward the conditions that we have, and that we can't go backwards and just like have like like it's such a delicate topic to talk about, but like we can't go back to the land back as in like perfectly to what it was before colonialism. We have to have land back in a way that functionally actually does bring fucking political power back to people who are currently stateless, right? Like fucking like First Nations people, black people, etc. And the fact is, like, a new Africa can exist on top of like or alongside other First Nations that exist as well. And there will be new nations that emerge in that process as well that like we can't even fucking imagine right now, because all we have is this fake fucking nation that we're the fake the country that is faking itself to be like some kind of legitimate nation. But there's no like, what do you got? There's no like coherent thing, UFC and wrestling or whatever, right? But then if you look at like smaller communities, like the East Coast, you can actually see there is like emerging cultures and shit. Like like take candlepin bowling for example. Do you ever notice how that like there's only like the one specific type of bowling that's done in like Boston and Nova Scotia and New Brunswick? It's like that's like an emerging like, you know, and many of like those emerging identities and emerging cultures will be based on working class struggle against imperialism and against fucking colonialism. It's a hard conversation, but like that's kind of the difference. And the worst part is that ACP, like I talked about before, has absolutely poisoned the well for this conversation, because they have made any discussion about like for example, we understand and accept 1776 to be absolutely true, and that yes, 1776 was a counter revolution, and that we don't need to preserve the fucking American flag or something like this, right? But we also understand that we can't like go backwards and like go back to exactly the way things were before colonialism. There has been hundreds of years of not only colonialism, but also the fight against colonialism that has taken many different forms. But before colonialism, there was no Métis people. You know, like before colonialism, like there was no black people here that also need national liberation. So you can't go backwards like that. And that's the thing that and like Samuel said, in South America as well, especially in Central America, there's so much of this that it can't go backwards. We do have to have liberation on all different fronts for all different people, but it can't be done by like mechanically romanticizing the past in a way that some tendencies like to do. And that is the segment that Gabriel Rockhill is critical of in his book when he talks about decolonial theory, right? Or post colonial theory. And and so many of my comrades who unfortunately fall for into this end up being thinking it's just saying like, oh well, Rockhill is just like ACP, right? And it's very frustrating because it's like here's like an academic that has emerged that actually is fighting against like those Western Marxists that have made revolution completely untenable and have made it like completely unappealing for like so many indigenous like people and just working class people in general. And you know, some of my comrades unfortunately slander him, saying that he's ACP, right? Larry, it is very mechanistic of you to suggest that time is linear. I know. But what can I say? A motion from Gaza. Welcome in, motion. Yeah, I hope that makes sense, and I'm sorry for that sidetrack. I just feel like it was important to mention because, yeah, this is the thing. That question really made me think about it right here. This question really made me think about it when I heard this said. But does this mean that it is a matter of indifference to the party? That it is all the same to it how a given nationality decides its destiny, whether in favor of centralism or succession? Does it mean that on the basis of abstract right of nationalities alone, it is possible, while expressing no opinion on the merits of demand, to recommend, even indirectly, autonomy for some, federation for others, and succession for still others? A nationality decides its destiny. But does that mean that the party does not influence the will of a nationality towards a decision most in accordance with the interests of the proletariat? That's what us communists do, right? I'm not saying everybody has to do that, but if you're a Marxist Leninist, this is what I hope you're doing alongside me. The party stands for freedom of conscience, for the right of people. Um, Trans Fox Girl and Dexy, if you suspect something, you're both in Laney's thing, right? Can you bring it to the attention of Laney if there is an issue in there? Okay, thank you, Frank. Good enough, easy enough. Thank you. Yeah, and I mean, look, we there's a reason why I do absolutely think that if you are able to support Palestine, you should do that. But I think that one of the best ways to do that is to contribute to a group like the Samira Project. Not to seem heartless or something, but you just have to understand that there is, like, I'm not trying to be heartless or something, but you just have to understand that we're on the internet, we're on Twitch, and people unfortunately will take advantage of this situation and any kind of tragic fucking event that's happening in order to scam people into supporting them. And then money that you want to go towards a helpful cause will unfortunately go to something else. And so we should be very careful to avoid that because it's not about being careless, it's not about being heartless, it's about understanding that you want your money to go to Palestine if you're contributing to Palestine. And that's why I say my personal recommendation is the Samir Project. They share their work that they do. They are a really good organization. Julia has donated to them. We have seen their work that they have done for a long time. They're on the ground in Gaza. You should. The Samir Project is my recommendation for sure. Yep, that's true, complaining. Absolutely. Thank you, Frank. That's the Samir Project there, in case anyone's interested. All right. So I think you understand the thing here. Marxist Leninists are not indifferent to the question. This is why I do remind people that like our program is that Cuba is leading the revolution because we want revolution America to be a whole thing, right? Not balkanization. We wanted to incorporate as many people as possible. And you can think about it this way that like as Cuba and Venezuela's revolution succeeds, and as more countries in that area succeed, they have joined themselves in a new revolutionary united project of America. Our job is to get along with that, to get on board with that. And it's just like struggling within the party. It's not going to be fucking perfect every step along the way. There's going to be all kinds of serious mistakes and setbacks and everything else. But we want to put an end to imperialism and colonialism before it puts an end to all of us. And it's such an important and such a vital struggle that you know it really is that or barbarism.
Juche is what's happening on this planet, y'all.
Exactly, doubled up audio guy. My fucking audio, what the hell? I feel like Parenti. For all the amazing sound systems they've got in the world now, they can't make a sound alert that works. Amazing, isn't it? Amazing. Mamma mia. All right. Okay, don't stop making me laugh, chat. I'm reading Stalin here. Here we go. Next part of Stalin. But it is by means of such equilibrists that the conference decides the question. Does anyone remember what the liquidators is? Just define liquidator in chat if you remember what it is. The most important thing in the above mentioned decision of the liquidators is the ideological collapse of the Caucasian liquidators, who betrayed the old banner of the internationalism in the caucus and succeeded in obtaining this decision from the conference. No, none of those things, Dexy. I've checked all of this. Liquidator was the liquid metal terminator. People who wanted to split the party up. Yes. Yeah, that's true. Do you know the liquidators specifically wanted to break the illegal sections of the party off. Those party organizations who were involved in illegal work, like the groups that Stalin was part of, for example, that were like acquiring arms for the Muslim revolutionaries and so forth. That's who the liquidators were. Spilled Bag, welcome in. Everybody go follow Spilled Bag of Ice on the Green Place. Yes, they wanted to get rid of the appropriators, to cast them out of the party, and make the party a purely legal thing. That's kind of what I'm thinking I'm going to do this weekend, NTC. Or some weekend. I think comrades might have given enough direct donos to help me go camping. So, next weekend. By the way, comrades, we're only 4 subs away from unlocking an extra emote. If anyone feels like supporting the stream, 4 subs. The Caucasian liquidators' turn towards nationalism is no accident. They began to liquidate the traditions of the party long ago. The deletion of the social section from the minimum program. The repudiation of the hegemony of the proletariat. See Discussany Litzbook number 2. The declaration of the illegal party as an auxiliary organization of the legal organizations. See Devnik number 9. All of these are commonly known facts. Now the turn has come for the national question. So this is Letters from the Caucasus, page 179, 178 in this volume. And then this is in number 9 of Dnevnik Social Demokrata, the Social Democrat's Diary. J.V. Plekhanov criticized the statements made by Georgian Menshevik liquidator S.J. Bladas in Golos Social Demokrata. From their very first appearance, in the beginning of the 90s, the organizations of the Caucasus bore a strictly international character. A united organization of Georgian, Russian, Armenian, and Muslim workers, fighting in solidarity against their foe. Such was the picture of party life. In 1903, at the first inaugural Congress of the Caucasian, strictly speaking Transcaucasian, social democratic organizations, which laid the foundation of the Caucasian Union. The international principle of building up the organization was reaffirmed as the only correct principle. From that time onward, Caucasian social democracy grew in the struggle against nationalism. The Georgian Social Democrats fought their nationalists. The National Democrats and Federalists, the Armenian Social Democrats, fought their Dashnakdians. The Muslim Social Democrats fought the Pan-Islamists. And in this fight, Caucasian social democracy expanded and strengthened its organization irrespective of groups. The question of cultural national autonomy came up for the first time in 1906 at the Caucasian Regional Conference. It was introduced by a small group from Kudes, which demanded a decision in its favor. The question was a resounding failure, as it was said at the time because, among other things, it was opposed with equal vigor by both groups, represented respectively by Kostrov and the writer of these lines. It was decided that what was called regional self-government for the Caucasus was the best solution for the national question, a solution most in accordance with the interest of the Caucasian proletariat, which was united in the struggle. Yes, that is how it was in 1906. And this decision was reaffirmed at subsequent conferences. It was advocated and popularized in the Menshevik and Bolshevik press in the Caucasus, legal and illegal. And here we got a note on Pan-Islamism. Soda, what's going on? Where are you? I hear my cat meowing, but I can't. I hear my cat meowing, but I can't figure out where a cat's meowing from. What the hell? Okay, a comment here on Pan-Islamism. I don't know if that was from. I don't know where that came from. I know when you hear Caucasian social democracy today, you think about the DSA, but we had a different time and place here. Yeah, I mean, this is talking about, like, a physical location. Pan-Islamism, a reactionary religious and political ideology, which arose in Turkey in the latter half of the 19th century among the landlords, the bourgeoisie, and the clergy, and later spread among the property classes of other Muslim people. It advocated the union into a single whole of all peoples professing the Muslim religion. With the aid of Pan-Islamism, the ruling class among the Muslim people tried to strengthen their positions and to strangle the revolutionary movement among the working people of the Orient. Today, the US British imperialists use Pan-Islamism as a weapon in their preparations for an imperialist war against the USSR and the people's democracies, and for suppressing the national liberation movement. In 1912, but 1912 arrived, and it turned out that we need cultural autonomy. Of course, in the interest of the proletariat. What had happened? What had changed? Perhaps the Caucasian proletariat had become less socialistic. But in that case, to erect national organizational and cultural barriers between the workers would have been the most unwise thing to do. Perhaps they had become more socialistic. In that case, what can we call these socialists, save the mark, who artificially erect and enforce barriers which are breaking down and which nobody needs? What happened to them? What had happened was that peasant kudas was dragged in its wake the social democratic Octobrists in Tiflis. Henceforth, the affairs of the Caucasian liquidators will be unable to stand up against their nationalist tide. They dropped the tried banner of internationalism, and they began to drift on the waves of nationalism, throwing their last thing of value overboard. A useless thing. Who wants it? But he who takes the first step must take the next. There is logic in everything. In Georgian, Armenian, Muslim, and Russian, national cultural autonomy, advocated by the Caucasian liquidators, will be followed by Georgian, Armenian, Muslim, and other liquidationist parties. Instead of a common organization, we shall have separate national organizations. Georgian, Armenian, and other buns, so to speak. See? This is what I was talking about earlier, actually. Is this what Messrs, the Caucasian liquidators, are driving at with their solution of the national question? Well, we can wish them more courage. What do you want to do? At all events, we can assure them that the other section of the Caucasian organizations, the Georgian, Russian, Armenian, Muslim, pro-party Social Democrats, will resolutely break away from Messrs, the national liquidators, from these traitors to the glorious banner of internationalism in the Caucasus. Social Democrat number 30, reprinted January 12th, or 25th in the new calendar, 1913. Reprinted from the newspaper. Signed K Street,